Good evening, those of you joining us online. We're talking again about the end times, purposes of the tribulation, and just in a way of review. We are going to get to Louise's big question that she posed last week.
We've been discussing it.
So we've been,
I bet.
working on that. So anyway, the names of the tribulation, of course, the 7-year period after the rapture. Jesus called it the tribulation, so the tribulation is a good thing to call it. It's also called Daniel's 70th week. It's called the time of Jacob's trouble. And then we looked at, again, this is just review, the nature of the tribulation. Tribulation is characterized by three things. Anybody? Any of them? Characterized by God's wrath. It is characterized by cataclysmic events, wonders in the heaven, wonders on earth. It talks about earthquakes and meteors and sun and moon turning dark, water turning blood-like in color. And then it is also characterized by death. Death is mentioned a number of times in Revelation, and especially the Battle of Armageddon is looked at, and this kind of gross, but the carnage is so great that the birds are called to come and eat the flesh of horses and people. It's a great supper of this battle at the end of Armageddon. So characterized by God's wrath, cataclysmic events, and by death. And then the purposes. And last week we looked at this judgment. And again, Revelation 11:18, that should destroy them which destroy the earth. And I want us to turn to Revelation 14 for just a moment. Revelation 14. And here we see some of this judgment described. Revelation 14, and it's compared to a harvest. And Jesus gave a parable about the tares and the wheats, tares and wheat, and that he talks about at the end of this, don't pull them up, don't pull up the wheat with the tares. You can't tell who's who, and of course between the plants, and also in God's kingdom, I think, and you can agree to disagree, but I think we will be surprised by some people we see in heaven, and I think we will be surprised at who we don't see in heaven, okay? And I think that's part of what Jesus was teaching in the parable of the tares and wheat. They look alike. Unbelievers and believers look alike, and sadly, they act alike sometimes. And so don't pull them out, because the reapers are going to sort them out in the end. And so Jesus uses that picture of reaping, and we have that here in Revelation chapter 14, verse 14. And I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and upon the cloud one sat like unto the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. And in the middle of verse 15, thrust in thy sickle and reap, for the time is come for thee to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. And the whole idea is, and it goes on, verse 6 or 18, again in the middle of the verse, thrust in thy sharp sickle and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. And it's talking about that there will come a point. We look at the long suffering of God, and I mentioned this a couple times before. There's many of us humanly would have acted much sooner than God is choosing to. God's not willing that any should perish, but there will come a time when sin is full and needs to be punished. And that's the picture we have here, is the grapes are full, everything's full, the vine is ripe, it is time to bring in the sickle, so to speak. And then verse 20, a horrible picture, the winepress was trodden without the city, and blood came out of the winepress, even unto the horse bridles, by the space of 1,600 furlongs. I don't have that conversion there for some.
582 feet.
582 feet. I knew someone had a study Bible with that in. So
one furlong.
you just think of that blood coming out. So there is going to be just incredible carnage. So it is judgment. And I like what, I can't remember, maybe it was McCune or somebody, 70 weeks is determined for the Jewish nation. And it is fitting that, we're in what we call the church age, parentheses or whatever, and where we have the opportunity, whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. And we have this time when God is calling people to repent, and we should be encouraging people to repent. And it's only fitting that before his kingdom starts, that there is a time of judgment. And so that goes along with this. And then another purpose, and there are several of them. I want to look at one more, and we touched on this a little bit last week, but I want to elaborate on it a little bit more. There is so there's judgment on earth, and then there is the chastening of Israel. And Schaeffer is a theologian from mid-1900s. I like what he wrote. So it's a chastening of Israel. Before entering her kingdom, talking about Israel, looking at Israel as a kingdom, before entering her kingdom, she must come before her king in judgment. And a lot of times, we need to remind ourselves that the 7 years is Daniel's 70th week. It is the time of Jacob's trouble. There will be a focus on, we focus on, when we read Revelation, we're like, wow, this is going to happen and that's going to happen. We think of all this, just catastrophic type things, and rightly so. But there's a focal point, or there's an emphasis on God's people, on Israel, on the Jews, and it is a time of their chastening. Take your Bibles and turn to Isaiah chapter 1, and we're just going to look at some of these real quick, some of these instances where we see God saying, I'm going to be chastening you. There is a time.
What?
Isaiah 1. Starting with verse 24. Isaiah 1, 24 through 26. I'm just going to read these quick. Therefore, thus saith the Lord of hosts, the mighty one of Israel, I will ease me of mine adversaries and avenge me of mine enemies. And then notice verse 25, and I will turn my hand upon thee. He's talking to his people. I'm going to turn my hand on you and purely purge away thy dross and take away all thy tin, and I will restore thy judgment as at the first, and thy counselors as at the beginning. Afterward thou shalt be called the city of righteousness, the faithful city. So I have to purge out. I have to, the picture here is the heating up the metal and getting silver hot or getting gold hot and skimming off the impurities, and that's the picture here. I'm going to turn my hand on you. I'm going to take care of my enemies, but then I'm going to turn my hand on you, and I'm going to get your impurities out. So it's a chastening that God's speaking of. Now Jeremiah chapter 30. And I think we looked at these last time. Jeremiah 30, verse 7, alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it. It is even the time of Jacob's trouble, but he shall be saved out of it. Jump now to verse 10. Therefore fear thou not, O my servant Jacob, saith the Lord, neither be dismayed, O Israel. For lo, I will save thee from afar, and thy seed from the land of their captivity, And Jacob shall return, and shall be in rest, and be quiet. None shall make him afraid. For I am with thee, saith the Lord, to save thee. Though I make a full end of all the nations whither I have scattered thee, yet will I not make a full end of thee. I'm going to take care of those nations that were harming you, that were punishing you. I'm going to take care of them. I'm not going to make a full end of you, but, middle of verse 11, I will correct thee in measure, and will not leave thee altogether unpunished. I am going to chasten you. That time is coming. Ron's favorite book, Ezekiel. No, maybe not. Ezekiel chapter 20.
A lot in there, though.
A lot in here is right. Ezekiel 20. Again, the picture is there is a time of chastening that's ahead for Israel. And right now, they're a scattered nation. God is going to bring them back and going to chasten them as a father chasteneth his son. Verse 33. As I live, saith the Lord God, surely with a mighty hand and with a stretched out arm and with fury poured out will I rule over you. So with fury I will rule over you. I will bring you out from the people and will gather you out of the countries wherein you were scattered, and with a mighty hand, with a stretched out arm, and with fury poured out. And I will bring you into the wilderness of the people, and there will I plead with you face to face, like as I pleaded with your fathers in the wilderness of the land of Egypt, so I will plead with you, and I will cause you to pass under the rod. And that's, again, a sign of judgment, or language of judgment. I will bring you into the bond of the covenant. I will purge out from among you the rebels, and then them that transgress against me, I will bring them forth out of the country where they sojourn, and they shall not enter into the land of Israel, and you shall know that I am the Lord. So again, we have this picture that God is going to chasten Israel. One more, Malachi. So this is the last book of the Old Testament. If you want to cheat and go to Matthew first and back up, that's a good way to do it. And, Malachi was last book of the Old Testament, and then God was quiet 400 years till he met, till God through angel Gabriel spoke to Zechariah before John the Baptist was born. But Malachi chapter 3, verse 2, but who may abide the day of his coming? And who shall stand when he appeareth? For he is like a refiner's fire, and like a fuller's soap. And he shall sit as a refiner, and a purifier of silver. And he shall purify the sons of Levi, and purge them as gold and silver, that they may offer unto the Lord an offering in righteousness. Jump down to verse 5. And I will come near to you to judgment. I will be swift against the sorcerers, against the idolaters, against the false swearers, against those that oppose or that oppress the hireling in his wages, and that oppress the widow and the fatherless. So again, we have this picture of there is coming a time of restoration for Israel, but there is also coming a time of chastening of Israel. So the purposes of the tribulation: 1 is judgment, 2 is chastening of Israel, 3 is salvation. We're going to, next week, we're going to look at the salvation of Israel, but we've already looked at a number of people being saved in the book of Revelations, multitudes from every kindred, tribe, nation, tongue it talks about. We'll focus on the Jews in particular. But I want to now, in the time that we have left, I want to go to the question that Louise asked last week, and it is this: what happens to people who die during the Millennial Kingdom? What happens to people who die during the Millennial Kingdom? So we're gonna kind of think through this. I'm gonna ask you some questions to kind of get us thinking and hopefully we'll come to the answer. But who goes into the Millennial Kingdom? So who are the ones that end up going into the Millennial Kingdom? There's
I think we all do.
all do, meaning who?
Dead and the physically dead, the spirits that are there, and us now in our spiritual bodies go to the Millennial Kingdom.
Okay. Anybody else want to elaborate on that? So believers will go, and unbelievers. Okay. I disagree, but we'll
We knew that was coming.
we'll look at it as we go. Okay. So we'll start with anybody else before I. Come on, Louise.
I talked to you about it already.
Okay.
Well,
So.
we weren't there.
So we have the next event.
I'm not the preacher though.
The next event is the trumpet, then the rapture, then the tribulation, and the Millennial Kingdom, the 1,000-year reign. For those of us that take literally a 1,000-year reign, there's many that don't. There's some that believe Jesus is king right now, ruling in heaven, and the 1,000 years already started. Okay, I have a problem with that. There's a lot of things in the Old Testament that you have to do a lot of gymnastics, hermeneutical gymnastics to spiritualize and explain away when there are promises that God has made. So there's a 1,000-year reign coming. Who ends up in there? Number one, resurrected believers. Okay, so 1 Thessalonians, Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, trump of God, dead in Christ shall rise first. Okay, so there are those, Beverly, Jean, hate to make you feel bad, but we aren't going to go before them. Okay, Christ comes, their souls come with them, they meet their bodies, we are changed. So resurrected believers, those that have died already, and raptured saints. Okay, we go up to heaven, we're there 7 years, we're being during the tribulation, we're being judged, bema seat of Christ, and then the marriage supper of the Lamb happens during the 7 years. At the end of the tribulation starts the Millennial Kingdom. So believers will go in. Okay, they're resurrected believers, raptured believers. Let's turn to Revelation chapter 20. Revelation chapter 20. And verse number 4. Verse number 3, Satan is bound for the 1,000 years. Revelation 20, verse 4. And I saw thrones, and they that sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus and for the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands. And they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. So people that are saved during the tribulation and are martyred, I mean, that's a pretty good description of a martyr right there. They're beheaded, they didn't take, so those people are going to reign with Christ. So believers in Christ that are dead now, believers that are alive now, and those that are saved and martyred during the tribulation. Those three groups for sure will go in to the Millennial Kingdom. And then we have the question of, and we talked about this a little bit, maybe it wasn't last week, but recently we talked about it. When are David and Moses and Abraham, when are what we call Old Testament saints, okay, to call them Christians are not accurate, is not technically accurate. They're referred to as Old Testament saints. So when are Old Testament saints resurrected? Okay, there's two thoughts. One is they're resurrected at the same time Christians are. Okay? So that God will not only, that Christ will not only bring those in what we call the church age, starting in Pentecost, God will not only bring those, but he will also bring Moses, Abraham, David, Noah, so on. There are others, and I fall in this camp, where I believe the Old Testament saints will be resurrected at this time, at the end of the tribulation. They will be resurrected, and then they will be those that sit on the thrones and that go into the millennial reign of Christ. So why do I think they don't get resurrected at the time of what we consider the resurrection or the rapture? The 7 years tribulation, the church is exempt from that, I believe. It's the Daniel's 70th week, okay, the 483 years are all about Israel. The 69 weeks is all about Israel. The 70th week is all about Israel. So to have the church be plugged into that is kind of inconsistent. Where the church is in the church age, we're in the parentheses, and the church is in heaven. We're being judged for our works. We're being rewarded for our works, and part of that rewards is what I believe Jesus taught, that you've been faithful over little, you're going to be over 5 cities. You've been faithful in this, you're going to be over that. I think that's part of the rewards. Is Millennial Kingdom will have positions of different kinds. So for the Moses and Noah and Abraham to be in heaven with the church, when the church is being judged, and the church is being judged not as in sin, it's our works are put, say our works are tried so as by fire, and wood, hay, and stubble gets burned up, 1 Corinthians 3, so that because it's the marriage supper of the Lamb, which is the church, the bride of Christ, all those things, it wouldn't make sense to me that Old Testament saints would be participating in something that just has to do with the church. Okay, so that's why I think they wait, and they're resurrected just before the Millennial Kingdom starts, and they go into the Millennial Kingdom because it's all, it's a focal point on the Jews. But regardless of when they're resurrected, okay, David's going to be in the Millennial Kingdom. And Moses and Noah and Abraham, they will be there during the Millennial Kingdom. There's no question that. So if it's when we're raptured and resurrected, or if it's 7 years later, it's not something to, what is one commentator, one guy on radio says, it's not worth dying over, okay? I'm not going to fall on the sword over it. What we can rest pretty certain is that they are going to be in the Millennial Kingdom in bodily form, okay? So here's who we have so far. Resurrected believers, those that have died in Christ before us. Raptured believers, possibly us. Martyrs that are saved during the tribulation. And then the Old Testament saints. One other group, or kind of group made of 2 subgroups, is I don't think you can, we know that multitudes are going to be saved during the tribulation, okay? I don't think you can say that every person saved during the tribulation is martyred. A lot of them are, okay, but I don't think you can carte blanche say every person saved during the tribulation is martyred. There will be some people that are saved during the tribulation towards the end, the end of the 7 years, and then Satan is, bound, and we enter into the Millennial Kingdom. So what's unique about that time period is there will be, and this is kind of mind-boggling, but if it's like, okay, how does that work? I don't know. There is going to be people in resurrected bodies alive during the Millennial Kingdom. There are going to be people in regular bodies in the Millennial Kingdom. Okay? They're now, wow, that's going to be weird. Well, think of John 21, Peter, James, John, I go fishing, and they're fishing. And Jesus is on shore, cooking lunch, cooking fish. Hey, you got anything to eat? And, they finally realize who it is. But it was not like he looked like a ghost. He looked like a person. And so, different than when they were with him on the Mount of Transfiguration, and they were like, everything was white, and Moses and Elijah's there, and they're like, how they knew Moses and Elijah when they had never met him is kind of a cool thing to think of,
Well, and the two people that walked with him on the road.
Road to Emmaus,
like,
yep.
Yeah, he
Yep,
was just like a man.
they didn't recognize, yep.
Yep.
But Luke 24, it almost seems like there was some there was like some, God was not allowing them to. The language
I know,
seems
but
like
my point is he was in a body.
Right.
He didn't
Spiritual body.
yeah. He was in a body that they didn't.
think,
Yeah, good point. So that is the group that goes into. So the point is, going into the Millennial Kingdom, there are people that are in normal fleshly bodies. Here's another way we know that. Revelation 20, verse number 6. Or let's jump back to 5.
I'm confused.
Okay, go ahead.
But the rest of the dead lived not again until the 1,000 years was finished. Who are the rest of the dead?
This is the first resurrection. So there were those, basically verse 4 is talking about people that participate in the first resurrection are basically those. I'm going to read 5 and 6 and then explain it after that. Rest of the dead live not again till the 1,000 years are finished. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy is he that hath part in the first resurrection. On such the second death hath no power, but they shall be priests of God and of Christ, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. So basically, saved people participate in the first resurrection. Okay?
Which is-
Saved people.
What's the first resurrection?
First resurrection.
Which is what?
Which is before, so the first, and this is where it gets, Christ was the first resurrection, if you get real technical, and then believers were another one, so that basically those that, kind of the way I look at it is, the lost, okay, the rest of the dead lived not again 1,000 years. Well, who were the rest of the dead? The rest of the dead were those that were, they're saved people that participate in the first resurrection, and those who are not reigning. This is, they live not until the 1,000 years were finished, and then verse 20, or chapter 20, verse 11, then gets into what happens to the rest of the dead. The rest of the dead, small and great, stand before God. The books were open, another book was open. So my take on it is anyone who is saved takes part in that first resurrection. And I believe that includes the Old Testament saints that were saved on, they were saved. Christ died for their sins after, they were technically, but they had a belief in what had been revealed to them at that time. So I'm looking at two groups. The first resurrection includes several resurrections. Rapture for us, maybe. Resurrection of those, and then the Old Testament saints just before, or again, if you want to argue that Old Testament saints were resurrected, when our resurrection takes place, I disagree with you, but it's not that big of a deal because it's not real cut and dried. We need to be dogmatic on what we can be, but when we can't, we have to, okay, here's what I think, and here's why. So the rest of the dead, the blessed and holy, I look at it this way: the ones that go into the Millennial Kingdom are blessed and holy. Well, for a sinful person to be holy, they have to be converted, right? For a sinful person to be holy, any of us to be considered holy, is something that God does. So blessed and holy is he that takes part in the first resurrection. The rest of the dead, those who are not blessed, if you're not blessed, you're cursed. If you're not holy, you're unholy. Those that are not in Christ, they remain dead during that 1,000-year reign. Okay? But here's where I was going with this. Verse 7, when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison, shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. And they went up on the breadth of the earth and compassed the camp of the saints about in the beloved city. Fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. So at the end of the 1,000 years, there's people that Jews and Gentiles, non-Jews, are converted during the tribulation. They go right into the Millennial Kingdom. They don't die. They have physical bodies. A lot of children can be born in 1,000 years. It is a perfect environment from the standpoint of Christ is ruling as king. There's a perfect government, and we'll in the future we'll get into some of the details about Millennial Kingdom. Lion lays down with the lamb. I'm not sure we're going to have time to get to that verse. Yeah, I don't know. We're not even going to get to your question.
You said you weren't going to
get to the answer. Okay, so that the living believers, unglorified believers, those that are saved during tribulation, go right into the Millennial Kingdom. They will have children, and they will have children, and they will have, there will be, who knows how many, but there will be enough that when Satan is loosed, that even though they outwardly were in the Millennial Kingdom, they still had a sin nature, and they still had the opportunity to accept or reject Christ as Savior during the millennial reign. Some reject him, and enough reject him that they rise up. They're stirred up with Gog and Magog and deceived by Satan and have this one. And it's very anticlimactic. I mean, they went up in the breadth of the earth. They surrounded the camp of the saints. They surrounded Jerusalem, and fire comes down from God out of heaven and devoured them, and that's it. Not a whole lot of fanfare. It's just boom, it's over. There are some verses in the Old Testament that talk a little bit more about it. And then the devil is cast into the lake of fire, we have in verse 10. So, back to the question. We know who goes into the Millennial Kingdom, or at least we have a fuzzy idea who goes in. So, is there death in the Millennial Kingdom? Well, we know there is at the end, because we see it right here. We know there is. I mean, we just read about it. Fire comes down from God out of heaven and devours them. So we know there is death. Take your Bible and turn to Isaiah 65. Isaiah 65. And so now we're answering the question, is there death in the Millennial Kingdom? We know there is at the end. I think, was your question specifically saved people dying during the Millennial Kingdom?
Where do they go
Where do they go? Okay.
if everybody's down here?
Okay. Got it. All right. 65, Isaiah 65, verse 17. You have, I'm guessing, Art Study Bible. Any study Bibles you have will probably show that 17, Isaiah 65, verse 17 through 25 refer to the Millennial Kingdom. There'll be some note about that.
Mine had the eternal blessing of Israel in the new earth.
Okay. Oh, in the new earth. Okay.
New earth.
Mine says joy of the new age.
The new age. Okay, here's...
Refers back to Revelation 21:22.
Yep. Verse 17, for behold, I create new heavens and a new earth. The former shall not be remembered, nor come into mind. But be glad and rejoice forever in that which I create. For behold, I create Jerusalem a rejoicing, and her people a joy. And I will rejoice in Jerusalem and joy in my people, and the voice of weeping shall no more be heard in her, nor the voice of crying. So some commentators say this is the new Jerusalem coming down. Others suggest it is the millennial reign. Verse number 20. There shall be no more thence an infant of days, nor an old man that hath not filled his days, for the child shall die 100 years old, but the sinner being 100 years old shall be accursed. So here's a problem with suggesting this is heaven, is that there is death. There's death and there's a curse. I want to explain verse 20 a little bit. Some of you might have a different version, but look at verse 20 as I read you a different version. No longer will there be in it an infant who lives only a few days, or an old person who does not live out his days. For the youth will die at the age of 100, and the one who does not reach the age of 100 will be thought accursed. So the idea is during this time, and that's why...
You were telling me.
This, what?
That's what you were telling me.
I hold to this being millennial kingdom because there is death. There is no death in heaven. We know from Revelation 21 verse 4, there is no more death, no more crying, no more sorrows. So there is no death. So you can't say this is heaven because it talks about death. But the idea here is that the longevity during the millennial kingdom is going to be very different right now. Death at a few days, there is no such thing. 100 years.
Well, hon, Moses and some of the saints at the beginning lived 100, 900, and because of how the earth, and if the earth is not new, but if the earth goes back to a
semi-restored state.
yeah, where the environment and all that, people could live 1,000 years.
Live longer. And there's some more that, look at verse 22. Middle of the verse. For as the days of a tree are the days of my people, and mine elect shall long enjoy the work of their hands. So what's being said here is that longer lifespan is going to be longer during the millennial reign. There's no babies dying at a few days. If you die at 100, verse 20 is basically saying, from a number of different things I read, and hopefully you followed it, if you die at 100, it's because you did something wrong. God took you out, to be blunt. I mean, you were wicked, and so God took you home, killed you, didn't take you home, killed you because you were wicked. So people are going to live more than 100. There's going to be long life. So long life will be normal. They'll enjoy days of a tree are the days of my people, and mine elect shall long enjoy the work of their hands. So here is the possibilities. Okay? A believer, my wife. So she's like, so what if an unsaved person kills a saved person during the Millennial Kingdom? I'm like, really? How do you come up with this stuff? I'm like, man. So,
He'd be the one that would be cut off.
so then we got into, okay, so how is the government run during the Millennial Kingdom? Is it going to be like the days of Moses? 2 people are caught in adultery, they both get stoned? You know, I mean, we don't know those details. But 3 possibilities of what happens if a believer, okay, if an unsaved person, all right, let's let's go back a little bit to Satan is loosed, rallies up this army to fight against God. I mean, these people have seen Christ rule.
Right.
They know he is perfect. They rise up against him. When they are bodily defeated, their soul goes to hell. Okay? And again, it's interesting that 100 years is brought up. Okay, is, just for fun, is 100 years the age of accountability during the Millennial Kingdom? I don't know. Do they need to be saved by the 100th birthday? I don't know. But unsaved people that reject Christ during the Millennial Kingdom and are struck dead, possibly, is what verse 20 is referring to, they also will not be saved. They will be lost. They will be in hell. So what happens to saved people that die during the Millennial Kingdom?
If they don't die, then nothing happens to them.
Okay, but you asked the question, I didn't.
You were answering it and saying they don't die, probably.
There's 3 possibilities. 1, they don't die. Believers, okay, we certainly know that if we're in a resurrected, glorified body, we're not going to die. Okay, so the only people we're talking about are people that get saved, the physical mortals that get saved during the Millennial Kingdom. Do they die? I don't know. I don't think so. Here's another possibility.
God don't tell us.
Huh?
God don't tell us.
God doesn't tell us. Here's another. I mean, there's only a few possibilities. 1, they don't die. Only unbelievers do. 2, they die and are instantly brought back to life again, which kind of, or what, they wait until then the eternal state starts. Or there is a resurrection of some kind at the end of the Millennial Kingdom, which is not mentioned. Unless you say Revelation 20, and this is opening a whole new can of worms, unless you say Revelation 20, and I think we'll come
up a new can of worms.
Yeah, we aren't going to open. We'll push the can cover back down and come back to it next week.
Work your spot.
Mark my spot. So we'll look at the 3rd possibility next week.
Well, it's still confusing.
Okay.
The rest of the dead live not again until the 1,000 years.
Right, and then pick it up in chapter 20, verse 12. And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God. And the books were open. Another book was open, which is the book of life. The dead were judged out of those things. So basically, the unsaved dead The unsaved dead are not, they remain in hell, Hades. They remain there. There's no reason for them to be judged sooner than the judgment at the end, I guess is the best. You know, there's people, think of the people rising up at the millennial reign, rising up against Christ at the end. They're going to be judged. Well, rather than have 5 end-time judgments, all the Christ-rejecting dead will be judged at one time at the great white throne. So there is no reason to bring the unsaved dead to life during the 1,000-year reign, because they're still going to be judged later.
No, live not again until the 1,000 years were finished, and those are the ones you were just talking about. Why bring them up until the first resurrection is over?
So Revelation 20 verse 12 is the one final judgment for all the unsaved, those who have not trusted Christ. So yeah, there's not a reason to, so the ones that are in the first resurrection are those that participate in the Millennial Kingdom. So it's saved people, it's Old Testament saints, you know, those are the ones that are going to be involved in God's kingdom. The unsaved, the Christ rejectors, they have they aren't participating in the kingdom. They have no reason, they're not judged yet. There's one final judgment, and so they live not until that end of the 1,000 years.
Who are the judges who were, I can't remember where you read it from, but you said they reign and rule the Christ.
Revelation 20 verse 4, and that
who
is...
Who are they reigning and ruling? Who are they ruling?
They're ruling...
The mortals, the people that...
Yeah, they're with Revelation 20 verse 4. I saw the thrones, them that sat on it, judgment was given unto them. They lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. Verse number 6, blessed and holy is he that hath part in the first resurrection. On such the second death hath no power, but they shall be priests of God and of Christ, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. So that's believers and Old Testament church saints that will rule. Well, I mean, I think it's going to be, instead of Governor Newsom, it's going to be Governor Funk, you know? California, you all right with California there, Dave?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's how I.
But I think when they say, and the dead in Christ didn't live again until, that's spiritually dead. We're going to be in our spiritual bodies. They're going to be spiritually dead and spiritually saved people. And in the millennium, they're going to be teaching between the profane and the holy and the profane. Well, they're teaching the spiritually dead people. So when Satan is risen again at the end of 1,000 years, those people have to overcome him just like we have to overcome him in the tribulation. So they have to still stand with God and Jesus through Satan's last attempt to try to steal their souls. But they're spiritually dead during the millennium years. And
So who is spiritually dead?
The unsaved.
Okay, spiritually dead and
And
are
they're being
unsaved.
taught-
Yep.
They're being taught between the holy and the profane during the millennium years, and that's who the people are ruling over. Which is the dead, you said, but they're spiritually dead, they're not in physical bodies.
So you think that the spiritually dead that are in hell right now, spiritually dead are in
I
hell.
think they're in heaven. When it says, absent from the body, be with the Lord. Whether you're saved or not, you're still with the Lord. You're on one side of the gulf or the other. Where Abraham was saying, who was it? Let me talk to my brothers. And the Lord said no. Well, they're on the
It
other
wasn't
side
Abraham,
of the Gulf.
it was-
They're
yeah.
still with the Lord, but they're just on the other side of the Gulf. So those people are going to be taught between the holy and the profane during the millennium age. There is no flesh in the millennium age.
There is no flesh in the
No.
millennial reign?
No.
So we're resurrected.
We're into our spiritual bodies. We transfer, our body stays here, our spirit goes to be with the Lord.
So
Absolutely.
when in Matthew 24, where Jesus judges the sheep and the goats, and the sheep go into the kingdom, go right on into millennial kingdom.
They
There.
go to be with him on the right side of the Gulf, and the other ones are going to the left side of the Gulf.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot.
It says that the seventh trump, we all shall be changed in the twinkling of an eye. What are we being changed into? Our spiritual bodies.
Well, you're calling it a spiritual body. I'm calling it a resurrected body.
but the flesh is in the ground or buried, and our spirit's gonna be with the Lord. Absent from the flesh, you're with the Lord. We don't come back to our flesh. Dust to dust, ashes to ashes, dust to dust.
Okay, so a resurrected body does not mean a resurrected body, is what you're
Not a
saying?
flesh body, it means resurrected, means our souls are being resurrected back to Christ.
Okay,
And then when it says that the dead in Christ will not reign, what's that say? What's that verse that he was confused about?
no, he was talking about Revelation, you're referring to First Thessalonians, I think, dead in,
Well, they're both the same.
20-5,
What is it? 20, read it again.
no, 20-5.
Read it.
But the rest of the dead live not again until the 1,000 years were done.
Remember,
So
we're
there-
still rolling.
Hmm?
We're still rolling.
Oh,
You should probably end if we want to have a discussion.
all right, we're going to, we're gonna take this offline for a little bit here, so, thank you for joining us, those of you that,
Sorry.
did, we won't keep you on all night here, we might be here all night, but we'll be back here Sunday, so, anyway, have a good night, thank you. Tap, 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 tap. Come on, Deanna, you can do it.